No one is saying that land must be taken away from our people. Rather, it is how we make sure that our people will have equitable access to land and security of tenure. So that all of us collectively as South Africans, we can move forward knowing that we have addressed the original sin.
My name is Tembakazi Macheke. I grew up in this farm and did my primary education in the farm next door. I was born here in 1973 and my parents were also born here. My father is 87 years old.
Tembakazi Macheke and her family have lived for generations on a farm called Gwatyu in the Eastern Cape. Her story is similar to many farming communities living in South Africa's rural areas, particularly in the former Bantustans. The daughter of a farm labourer, she grew up in a family that was poor but secure, even during decades of oppression under apartheid.
As much as we didn't have much, but it was a peaceful and loving environment, So I enjoyed being here. As you know, when you are young, you are not aware of the challenges. It's only the parents that are aware, the difficulties that you are going through and the risk maybe of your future not being what maybe they would want you to be.
The story of Gwatyu is a microcosm of the problems that continue to plague land reform, where the challenges of redistribution, restitution and security of tenure include not only addressing past injustices and making farms productive, but reclaiming identity.
What defines me, defines us, is not just food. What defines us is what we mean, is what we are. And what we are finds connection to our forefathers, what they stood for, what they fought for. It's not just a question of access to food. It's a question of correcting an emotional and various type of ills.
Stretching over 38,000 hectares of tough mountainous terrain and consisting of 77 farms, the land now known as Gwatyu has a complex and tragic history. In the 19th century, it was located north of the Eastern Cape colonial boundary. It was called Tamburki by the British colonialists, the sand name for the Abatembu clans occupying the area. One of the most powerful clans of the Abatembu was the Amachachu. They were known as the fiercest of warriors.
Amachachu is one of the 5 houses of the Tembus. It's the painful hidden truth. If you go to the entire Tembu clan, there is no clan, there is no house in the entire Tembu that got involved in wars against the English people like Amachachu. The history is there, it's undisputed.
At the height of their power, the Amachachu territory stretched across West Tembu land and included the present towns of Whittlesea, Cathcart and Queenstown. But with their defeat by the British colonialists in the mid-19th century, the Amachachu identity was destroyed.
Amachachu were no more as a people, and their chieftaincy has disappeared. The aim was to obliterate the name of Amachachu from the face of the earth.
They were a sore thumb to the English rule, to the extent that Sir George Cathcart issued a decree that they must stop existing as a tribe.
Deputy Finance Minister Mondli Gungubele is a direct descendant of the Gwatyu royal lineage.
But Amachachu, in reality, they never dissipated, but they got scattered to many areas in South Africa.
The Gwatyu royalty were returned to Gwatyu in 1982. Deputy Minister Gungubele's uncle is the current chief. His praise name is Jongulundi. I visited Chief Jongulundi at his home called The Great Place in January this year. In May 2017, he had been seriously injured in a car crash that killed his wife. Now, although physically still fragile, his mind is as clear as ever about the ultimate aspirations of the Gwatyu.
The re-establishment of the traditional leadership of Gwatyu in the land of their forefathers.
With the dispossession of the Gwatyu, their land was taken over by white farmers who controlled the agrarian economy for the next 100 years, until the so-called independence of the apartheid Bantustan of Transkei in 1976 under the rule of Chief Kaiser Matanzima. 20 years later, the Heath Commission of Inquiry would find that the Bantustan had been rife with corruption.
Both to be economically viable.
Daliwonga Kaiser Matanzima wanted to elevate himself to the position of king. And he took advantage of the fact that Gwatyu had been obliterated, that is, their kingship had been obliterated. So there was a vacuum there.
Farmers who had been farming this place commercially, highly productively, it's a beautiful part of our country, were bought out. Their erstwhile laborers were left on the farms without any regularization of the ownership of the farm. And then they were running up and down trying to get the farms transferred to them by the then Bantustan leaders without much success. They were taken for a ride, all sorts of charlatans.
According to the findings of the Heath Commission, Matanzima dished out Gwatyu farms to his relatives and cronies, many of whom became absentee landlords. The farm workers who stayed behind after the white farmers left built strong communities, some of them becoming farmers in their own right.
I have some, remembrance and the picture of what it was here when we had, white farmers, and when we transitioned to the Transkei. Even though I was still young, but I have an idea of what was happening, the kind of life that we lived.
And with the advent of democracy in 1994, all the Gwatyu farms were returned to the government to be held in trust for the people. The farm dwellers of Gwatyu believed the land would be transferred into their names, providing them with support and security of tenure.
I had, this belief that this is our government. Definitely, they will do whatever they can do for us to change our lives. But unfortunately, I think I was just naive.
32 nations, 44 matches live on SABC 1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
The Western Cape needs national government to fulfill its mandate on ensuring a bulk water supply.
We must ensure that the city of Cape Town never confronts this particular situation again.
The ESCOM is serious about stamping out corruption, which is why the market is now beginning to accommodate us.
And looking at neighboring countries, expecting Botswana just to see partly cloudy skies with a half 34 in Gaborone.
News today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
The people of Gwatyu have travelled a long and painful journey to get the land transferred to their names, but instead of reaching the promised land, most now survive in a wasteland. Its fertile soil is eroded due to drought and overgrazing, its windmills damaged and boundary fences broken.
As there were farmers here, white farmers, there was fencing, there were boreholes, there were tipping tanks, there was plowing land. We thought the government would assist us in all those things.
Today, the farming communities that live there are mostly unemployed and elderly.
I live in a community that depends on social grants. Most people here are unemployed, and some left, to urban areas, to look for better opportunities. So when you think of it then, and the situation, because even the social grant, not everyone qualifies to get a social grant.
Amabhulu akasekho kwangena urhulumente kaMatanzima still zange kubekho ndiphathekayo nangoku wedemocracy urhulumente simvotelayo akakasenzeli into sisasokola eGwatyu sisokola nabantwana asityi nazi indawo sifuna usetyenziswa kodwa kunzima
ukunzima noba nibe nenkomo inkomo lizitye zaphela ngohamba nzima simbalwa nezikhuyo phaya into endilangazilelayo kulima okona ukwenza kumlungu.
They betrayed us.
I see Gwatyu as we speak today, there's a stasis there, in the sense that there's no development, one, and there's a stasis in terms of the ownership of the land, and three, in terms of who's in charge there.
We want this land to be transferred to the community of Gwatyu so that we can also become the farmers.
It is the government of South Africa that is owning this land, and it is that government that is denying these people this land so as to enable them to live off this land.
I visited Thembekazi in 2017 and met her father and members of the farming community. In 2013, they had formed a Communal Property Association, or CPA. They had done this with the assistance of a former Umkhonto weSizwe commander who had become a successful businessman.
They had been battling for years, decades, to try and find a way around ensuring that they get security of tenure over the land so that they can use it for themselves. And none of them had heard of a CPA. And then I found this act on the CPA. In terms of that act, it is very simple to get any community that you come across. That is the theory. To get any community to secure tenure of land and begin to use that firm. But the reality is something else.
CPA has very, very strong rights because it's registered in the deeds office. It's a group ownership. It's a full-on title, equivalent to a freehold title. But the problems that have emerged with communal property associations is they often lump large numbers of people into them. And the law didn't sufficiently demarcate individual rights within the collective. And that means they become terribly vulnerable in any of these kinds of situations.
If they have access to that piece of land and having been registered, they can be able to apply to the relevant departments or institutions for assistance or funding for their farming projects. But my experience of the CPAs, working with other CPA groups as well, I mean, there are always internal conflicts, competing interests, factions.
But the divisions in Gwatyu are not within the CPA, but between the CPA and the traditional Amachachu leadership. The latter regard Mabena as an interfering outsider and Thembekazi as a troublemaker.
There's been some people there who don't belong there, who have been instigating people to cause chaos. There's a chap called Mabena who we don't know where he comes from, who has been a leader. And I can tell you, we can demonstrate to you that that chap has got no history in that area.
I hadn't heard of Gwatyu, of a place called Gwatyu, before meeting her. And what she told me really touched me to a point that I resolved it there and then. That I want to see this place, I want to meet the people there, I want to meet the authorities, I want to meet your tribal leadership if there is any, to get to the bottom of this thing, because it goes against everything that I had sacrificed for.
But there is now a conflict between the farm dwellers who have turned to the laws of South Africa's constitutional democracy for security of tenure versus the traditional leadership and their historical right to the land. The Amachachu have lodged a land claim that covers much of the area they occupied before their defeat by the British. Although it was initially rejected because it predates the 1913 Land Act, it has since been reopened.
The Chachu have lodged an official claim. So that's a capital C. That's a claim, a land claim in terms of restitution over the entire area. No land can be transferred or developed while there's a claim hanging over it.
But already there are allegations that many farms in Gwatyu have already been allocated to politically connected individuals.
There were officials from the rural development. They were telling people that, okay, the government is in the process of transferring the land, and there are farms that have been given or allocated to certain people, 40 farms.
So with the mismanagement of state-owned land like Gwatyu, that should theoretically be transferred to the people, but in reality is in such a shambles, how can government expect to effectively implement its planned policy of expropriating private land without compensation?
Oh my God. You've got 40,000 hectares here that are lying fallow. What are you going to do with those farms that you want to expropriate without compensation? Those farms that you're talking about are being used productively. They are contributing to our food security.
And without security of tenure, the farm dwellers face an uncertain future.
This is a problem for the whole of South Africa, is that ostensibly people have security of tenure because we have back-to-back laws that cover everyone in urban and rural areas in all their various situations. But in reality, there's no certainty.
If Amachachu achieve their historic claim, it's not unreasonable for them to suspect that they might be chucked out. I can say with authority, I play a key role on the future of Amachachu. That is not going to happen.
32 nations, 44 matches live on SABC 1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
Corruption both in the public and the private sectors needs to be combated.
Where there are clear cases of wrong that has been done, that must commence immediately.
Something is being done about corruption in our country.
Currency, even although it strengthened dramatically after the ANC's recent electoral conference, could conceivably go stronger yet.
He had the soul that would not be for sale.
Stay tuned to Your World for your final news roundup, Monday to Sunday at 21:30.
32 nations, 44 matches live on SABC 1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
The irony of Gwatyu's current situation is that in the 1990s it was regarded as a pilot land reform project. Rosalie Kingwell was part of the team commissioned by the former Department of Land Affairs to conduct the first land audit of Gwatyu to determine to whom the land should be transferred.
A lot of officials and outside people who are making applications from the outside for this land, they would see it as their land for the taking. And the farm dwellers who actually have the skills and do have masses of cattle, They're seen as invisible and powerless.
The recommendations of the land audit were clear.
Some places where the lessees are in control, they should get the land. Other places where farm dwellers are clearly in control, they should get the land, and then there should be support.
But the findings were never implemented.
It's tragic to see what's happened, that not any of the recommendations by us or others have been acted on. And it is very overwhelming to try to work out what the exact causes are. It could be one of those situations of the perfect storm. You've just got so many different ingredients all coming together, and in this case to totally paralyze the future. But this is not, just want to point out that this is not only Gwatyu. All the other pockets of state land where I worked, and I worked in many, not one of those got acted on. And that points to gross ineptitude.
But is it only ineptitude, or does it point to a more sinister agenda?
Every year there are disbursements by Parliament for rural development. I think that is where the problem of some people, such as the people of Gwatyu, with access to land lies, because this is a nice milking cow. That's my summation.
In 2015, the EFF raised the issue of Gwatyu during the Department of Rural Development's budget speech in Parliament.
The people of Gwatyu in the Eastern Cape, around Queenstown, whose tenure to land is insecure, and who have failed to get any support from your grandiose programs, from your government, due to nepotism and favoritism, is deeply embedded in corruption in that specific province.
The Democratic Alliance also visited Gwatyu in April this year and has taken on the cause of the CPA.
The issue of Gwatyu has also become a political hot potato.
During 2016, in desperation, the unemployed and pensioners in the community used their own social grants to travel from the Eastern Cape to Cape Town. They marched to Parliament to protest outside while the Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform, Gugile Nkwinti, was delivering his budget speech.
This issue precedes my arrival in the department. They had indicated that they were not getting the necessary attention from the department. I then took it upon myself to report to the minister and to set up this task team, the ministerial task team, which met with them when they were in Cape Town, and they further met, I think it was in April 2016.
We were hopeful that now, the time has come. They are going to fix our problems. It never took off because the task team that was supposed to lead the process never came back to us.
And almost 5 years after it was established, the Gwatyu CPA is still unregistered.
In fact, the structure they call a CPA is not a CPA in terms of the Act, because a CPA can only exist after a recognition and approval by the minister.
The Department of Rural Development and Land Reform was no longer keen on CPAs and was downplaying them and trying to, was actually blocking their development. I think one of the rationales was a competition was starting to develop in various parts of the country between tribal authorities wanting now also to take transfer, and you'd get a competition between the CPA and a traditional authority.
In 2015, the Gwatyu CPA requested the department to conduct another land audit of Gwatyu to ascertain what government funding had been allocated to the farms and again to determine who the land would be transferred to.
We went to the office of the mayor in Queenstown, and amongst the demands that we made there was that a forensic audit of expenditure in the previous 5 years over Gwatyu should be made.
And this is where the saga takes the most disturbing turn. Correspondence between Thembekazi and the department confirmed that an audit was conducted, but the results have never been made public. Together with an investigative journalist who was assisting with research, Special Assignment visited the Legal Resources Centre in Grahamstown. They had been trying to obtain a copy of the audit on behalf of the CPA. Their efforts so far have been in vain.
Thembekazi gave me a couple of phone calls, people who were actively involved in the auditing process. I reached out to them, I made a few calls, I emailed them, and finally I was advised that the proper way of getting hold of the audit report for me was to apply through the PI application. That's something that I did.
But now the department has gone further than to merely withhold the report. As this email to the LRC confirms, they are actually denying its very existence. But we have proof that it exists. An official in the East London Department of Rural Development actually showed the investigative journalist the report on her computer screen, and he conveyed this to me via email. He also mentions in the email that there seemed to be no evidence of a competing land claim. Furthermore, we have confirmation of the land audit from the Deputy Minister of Rural Development himself, but he says the delay in making it public is due to the overlapping claims.
The results of that land audit are the ones that made us feel that we must really tread with caution, because in relation to this land audit, it actually came to the fore that there is an overlap. There is also a certain number of people in the community that do not come from the oil area, and therefore we're not able to just make a blanket approach. But our intention is to make sure that the community is taken along.
When will the results of that 2015 land audit be made public?
What I can tell you, in this financial year, we would be able to do that soonest.
It seems as if nobody is really concerned, those in authority, let me say. They do very little to assist us.
All the suffering of the people of Gwatyu, I know, and it is my suffering too, and my family too. We hope that one day we will be heard.
Yelingu naphakade